Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. Before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from and what time it is there. That way, YouTube will keep showing you more stories like this. Now, let's begin. The music was ear-splitting. My body started moving on its own, joining the packed dance floor. I'm Hal, 26 years old, and that day was supposed to be special. We were at some brand new club in downtown Columbus. Mike had picked the place, supposedly a premium music experience, in a uniquely designed venue. Even Alex, who usually hated crowded spots, came along just for me. The club was huge, but something about it made my skin crawl. Maybe it was the dim hallways or weird little corners in the old building, a factory back in the 1950s. Or maybe it was how the lights kept flickering, plunging the place into brief darkness every few seconds. And then suddenly, it went completely black. The music cut off. Pitch black darkness swallowed everything. At first, people laughed nervously or murmured in confusion. A few folks flipped on their phone flashlights, casting eerie spots in the gloom. I realized I was gripping Alex's shoulder. Mike was nowhere to be seen. The air grew thick, heavy, suffocating. 10 minutes dragged by, still no power. An uneasy feeling crept over me, and then I heard it, a soft sob. It started faint, easy to mistake for background noise, but it got clearer, louder, raw and desperate. My grip tightened on Alex's shoulder, but before I could whisper my anxiety, a piercing scream split the air. My whole body jolted, goosebumps everywhere, heart hammering like it might explode out of my chest. Weirdly enough, no one else around me seemed to hear it. The flashlight on my phone still cut through the darkness. I stood frozen, straining to separate that scream from the rest of the noise. I grabbed Alex and pulled him toward the sound. Around us, the crowd was getting restless from the blackout. People were shouting, others desperately searching for exits. In the chaos, Alex slipped from my grip. I shouted his name, but it was useless. Another scream pierced the air, louder this time and closer. It came from one of those shadowy hallways I'd noticed earlier. I moved toward it, my phone's flashlight beam guiding my way. The corridor was narrow and endless, lined with closed doors. The air turned colder, like I'd stepped into another dimension entirely. No one else was down here. This place probably wasn't meant for visitors. At the far end, a door stood slightly open, dim light spilling through the gap. My pace slowed, my heart thudding so loud I could hear it pounding in my ears. As I got closer, a pungent fishy odor filled my nostrils. Curiosity, or maybe reckless stupidity, pushed me onward. My hands shook as I nudged the door open. Inside was a cramped storage room. In the corner, someone knelt with their back to me. In front of them lay a motionless body, blood pooling darkly on the floor. I just stood there, frozen. Slowly, the man turned around, and I recognized Mike's face immediately. But his eyes, they were hollow, wild, and he had a knife in his hand, dripping bright red. It all happened fast, like some twisted nightmare. Mike rose slowly, staring right at me, and started walking toward me, knife still clutched tight, leaving red droplets trailing behind him. I wanted to run, I wanted to scream, but my body refused to move. My feet felt like they were nailed to the damn floor. Suddenly, a flashlight beam sliced through the darkness from behind me, and Alex's familiar voice echoed down the hallway. Mike stopped in his tracks. His eyes cleared slowly, like he was snapping out of a trance. He stared at the knife in his hand, then down at the motionless figure on the floor, and a look of absolute horror spread across his face. He dropped to his knees, letting the knife fall to the ground with a clatter, and started mumbling incoherently. As I cautiously stepped closer, I finally made out what he kept repeating. It told me to do it. It told me to do it. Suddenly, the lights surged back on, blinding us. Music boomed again from the main dance area, and the cheers and laughter outside felt disturbingly out of place compared to the horror unfolding in front of me. In that moment, I finally recognized the man lying on the ground, James Morrow. He'd been all over the news recently, especially because of Mike's family. 2 years ago, James had raped and murdered Mike's sister, but walked free due to a lack of evidence. Mike had been secretly tracking him ever since, and now, by some sick twist of fate, they'd both ended up at this club, on my birthday of all nights. I stood there, numb, watching my best friend kneeling next to the man who had destroyed his life. The screams still rang inside my head. I couldn't even tell if they were James's, Mike's, or just echoes in my own mind. Distant sirens pierced the night, growing louder. All I could do was watch helplessly as Mike, panicked and trembling, was led away. And Alex stared back at me, eyes wide with shock. My 26th birthday had become a nightmare I'd never forget. I'm Leon, 30, and I live with my wife in Washington. It's been exactly 10 years since I lost my best friend on March 13th, 2014. He was the one who had accompanied me since my childhood. His sudden disappearance shocked everyone. I can still clearly picture his mom's pained and haggard face. The search spread across Washington state and the neighboring states, and it went on for a year. Eventually, the police had to call off the search because nothing turned up. Every year on this day for the past 10 years, I think about him and go through the photos we took together. Today was no different. I remembered his social media account and checked it out. I was moved when I realized he was stuck at 20, while I've grown into an adult. When I checked the messages, the last one he sent me was also on this day 10 years ago, and I never replied. As I scrolled through our conversation, I was shocked to see how much he had to say. He used to say those things to me all the time, but I just ignored them. Maybe I was just too careless back then. February 25th, 2014, 12 a.m. Leon, you must be asleep, but I can't sleep because that evil spirit is watching me. February 25th, 2014, 0300. Do you believe in heaven, Leon? I've always wondered if there's really a heaven for good people and a hell for evil ones. I read his thoughts too late. I did reply to the message, but it was pretty superficial and perfunctory. The more I read the messages, the guiltier I felt toward the friend I always saw as my soulmate. February 13th, 2014, 12 a.m. Leon, this is my blog. There are many things I can't tell you directly or text you. I ignored the link he sent. Why? I clicked on the link, and it led to a private blog. There aren't many posts, and they were all published in a short period of time. February 2nd, 2014. I think I'm the only one who knows this, Leon. I was sitting by the window in my room and noticed a small space in Mr. Joseph's house. Do you remember him? The neighbor was really friendly and lovable. But no, that was just a perfect mask for an evil person. I saw him torturing his wife, Leon. February 7th, 2014. Cassie, it looks like she was murdered by her own husband. I heard her pleading in a very pitiful way, and then a sound of impact. Nothing too loud, but clear enough for me to hear. And after about 20 minutes, I didn't hear Mrs. Cassie's voice anymore. Leon, it looks like I was discovered. That nice neighbor noticed me. I remember that year Cassie went missing, and the police found her in the basement, having committed suicide. I remember that after Cassie's case, he started showing signs of fear and spoke less. He was usually very quiet, so no one noticed anything unusual about him. A week later, he didn't come to class. I texted him, and he said he wasn't feeling well because of insomnia. That was the only message where I showed concern for him. I kept reading his blog after that. February 20th, 2014. What should I do, Leon? My nerves are about to explode. I'm too scared to sleep, leave the room, or even take my eyes off the window. I'm afraid that the devil might come after me at any time. But I can't tell anyone about this. The devil's eyes are really scary. Help me, Leon. March 13th, 2014. I don't think I'll be able to escape the devil, Leon. I feel like I'll end up like Mrs. Cassie, in a dark place where no one knows. I burst into tears when I read these last lines. The last post on the blog was also the day he went missing. Unlike Mrs. Cassie's, his disappearance turned into a mystery that's still unsolved. But today, after 10 years, I've uncovered this terrifying secret. I cried a lot, feeling incredibly regretful for having missed so much. Once I calmed down, I called the police and gave them all the evidence. His mother fainted when she heard the story. I know she's been holding on to hope for the past 10 years. A mother's strong belief that her son is still alive and will come back. But the miracle didn't happen. The police found a skeleton in the basement of Mr. Joseph's house, lying curled up with signs of decay. The clothes were familiar, so it was definitely him. But we need to wait for the forensic exam results. After 3 days, everything was clear. He was killed by Mr. Joseph at night and hidden in that basement for the past 10 years. He renovated the house, sealing off the basement completely, so it wasn't used anymore. Everyone assumed it was because he was too sad about his wife's passing. But in reality, it was a way to hide his cruelty and heartlessness. He got life in prison without parole. My friend's family had to face bad news twice, and now they have no hope left. They moved away to escape the pain. I'll never forget my friend. My name's Sandra. 35 years old, I am a single mother, with a 10-year-old daughter, Lonnie. We were enjoying a rather cozy life due to my established real estate firm. I was going to be assigned a renovation project of an abandoned high-rise in downtown city. This project I had always been wanting for the last 20 years. It wasn't until now that I had enough finance to run it. This project was my father's legacy. But when the project went to its final stage, my father's company encountered some heavy problems and went bankrupt. I bought it back years later and running renovation for his sake. On the day of site survey, I went along with the construction crew and Lonnie. She was so excited and ran around the place with all her youthful joy. After just a moment, my eyes moved off her. Lonnie was gone from my sight. I dragged myself all around the place calling for her, but there's no response. I called Lonnie on her phone, and she said she's on 13F. Lonnie turned the front camera on so I could see the surrounding. Upon seeing what she was showing, both familiar and creepily alien, I yelped aloud at Lonnie, telling her come out of there quickly. However, the phone suddenly lost its connection. So I frantically ran over that accursed place to get her. This building wasn't finished yet, so the only way from 6th floor to 13th floor was using the stairs. The high heel I wore really became a nuisance, where the leather ground on my skin bled me. The moment I saw the familiar shape of my daughter, I rushed to her side. Lonnie's action puzzled me. She was putting her hand over the picture of 2 hands holding each other on the wall. I dragged Lonnie out, asking whether she was all right, only to have her say that the signal was really bad, she couldn't hear anything. Lonnie and I went back down, and before leaving I glanced back at the hands on the wall and my stomach turned. I felt guilty thinking about it. In the evening, we, just like every day, would have dinner and talked about what happened in the day. Around 10 p.m., Lonnie went to her room, at which point I bid her good night and went to my room as well. Around midnight, the commotion from Lonnie's room jolted me from my sleep. I went around and saw her sleeping soundly on her bed. Sensing nothing out of the ordinary, I turned back, then suddenly felt a chill by Lonnie's whisper. "Mom." So I turned around, asking her, "What's up, honey?" Lonnie was still there in her sleeping position, unchanged by what I saw before. Might just be my mind speaking. I thought to myself, before tiptoeing back to my room to not wake my daughter up. Next evening, I had to stay up rather late until midnight to work. Then a slight humming jolted me from my working trance. That was clearly Lonnie's voice. But that song she's humming, made me shudder. I ran to her room, seeing her not yet asleep, but sitting on her bed, singing. The tune, the lyrics, all of them was slowly draining my sanity away. So I shook Lonnie's shoulders. She opened up her eyes as if snapped from a trance, then stared at me, full of suppressed anger. "You'll pay for it." It was no longer my daughter's voice, but of someone else I knew too well. Her words stunned me. I could only squeeze my fingers in terror. Lonnie woke up from the intense pain I accidentally caused her. She immediately told me that she's sleeping and not remembering anything that had just happened. However, the strings of creepiness didn't stop there, because the very next day, at exactly midnight, Lonnie was this time in the living room, mumbling. I rushed downstairs immediately upon hearing it. The living room lights were all off. Lonnie, in darkness and sleepiness, ran over to the front door, opening it. She invited in an invisible guest. Invisible indeed, because I could clearly hear the footsteps over the floor, which gave me goosebumps all over. Lonnie happily asked the guest to sit down. Then she casually poured the juice to the glass opposite her. I couldn't take it any longer, so I rushed over her, shaking the girl out of her sleepwalking trance. Yet she was really unresponsive, not yet snapped from that trance. A sound came over from behind me, and I was startled realizing that the juice glass had emptied itself out. I immediately dragged the girl back to her room and locked the door. That's it. I'll watch over her tonight. A ringtone rang aloud from somewhere in the room, and it didn't take me too long to spot a strange phone under Lonnie's pillow. Opening up the phone, it was the pictures taken of me and my friend back then in high school. And on that phone, I could read clearly the last text message sent to that person I knew too well. It was just too much for me. I could no longer hold back my tears anymore, hugging her, and fell asleep somewhere down the line. Next morning, Lonnie got up and seemed to act normal again. "Where do you get this phone, honey?" Lonnie told me that she got this phone on 13F of the building I was assigned to renovate. I gut-wrenched at her word. Something's bad was about to happen. That ominous entity had likely followed us home, and soon it would come for Lonnie, my daughter. That morning, I came alone to 13F. The closer I got to the graffiti with two hands holding on each other's, a sense of dread and guilt washed over me. 15 years ago, I had a friend, and her name was Emily. We're like inseparable back then. Our families were close, too. My father and Emily's all invested greatly into this building project. Emily and I were very excited on the prospect of us residing together in this apartment complex. But at the crucial part of the project, my father made a huge financial mistake that heavily impacted both his company and Emily Father's. My father had no other choice but to declare bankruptcy. My family must moved out to a rundown house in the city's shanty town. While Emily's family tried to hold on, yet slowly sinking into further debt. Emily and I, we both spiral further and further to despair. We grew to hate living in such hellhole outside of our control. On our very last text message, we decided to leave this hellish world together. One afternoon 15 years ago, Emily and I, we came together to 13F of this very building. Emily carried her father's shotgun. We planned to take turns shooting ourselves. Emily, without any hesitation, went first. And I was too panicked at that and ran away after seeing her turning inside out. So I left her there, alone, and not telling anybody about it. The regret washed over me. I should have aware of that stupidity and stopped Emily altogether. But I didn't. Knelt over the wall, I begged Emily for forgiveness and for her to leave my daughter alone. Suddenly, a scribble appeared beside the two hands graffiti that read simply, "Payback." My body shook uncontrollably upon seeing it. I booked it right back home. The first thing I did was calling out for my daughter. Inside her room, I was shocked seeing all the graffiti drawn from red markers all over her walls. Lonnie was holding the shotgun and pointing to her head. I jumped over with all haste. If there's a life to end, it's mine, and not my daughter's. The moment I could touch the gun, the trigger slipped and shots fired. Blood oozed out all over my body and Lonnie's, and I wielded the last of my strength to carry her outside, frantically called for help. Immediate assistance meant my daughter's stable now, but due to the bullet trajectory to her brain, she's still in a very bad shape. The horror subsided, replaced with tragedy, and the graffiti disappeared. For now, I am still trying to take good care of Lonnie. Let's hope she might have the chance to recover. The weird things about Emily seems to no longer be there anymore. Let's hope she forgives me. I'm Bradley, a senior majoring in marketing at Stanford. Our group of 5 has been tight since freshman year. Me, Steve, Joe, Naomi, and Jenny. We are all really proud to be the top students in the class. Especially Jenny. She's the school beauty queen, super pretty and talented. Since it's senior year and studying is pretty tough, we'll just meet once a week. The meeting place will rotate at each person's home or apartment. 6 months ago, on a Sunday evening, that was our group's get-together before we started the stressful exam review period. The meeting was set for 8 p.m. at Steve's place. Steve's family is pretty well off, so he lives in a spacious house that his parents gave him for his 18th birthday. Everyone showed up on time except Jenny. In the afternoon, he mentioned he'd be picking up some beer and told us not to be late. After 20 minutes of waiting, Jenny still hadn't shown up. We set the food on the table in Steve's bedroom and started chatting. We'd collect stories about studying, love, family, and more over the week and share them. More than 40 minutes after the meeting, Steve, Joe, and I swapped guys' stories. Naomi kept calling Jenny, but she still didn't answer. This girl is really like that, showing up and disappearing, coming and going all over the place. An hour had passed. The food on the table was a mess, and the stories were starting to dwindle. We had a few minutes of silence, each of us holding our phones. The power went out suddenly, so we grabbed our phones and turned on the flashlights. The room felt a bit eerie with the dim light. Everyone's faces looked half in shadow and half lit, and their expressions were pretty tense. Joe suddenly burst out laughing. "Are you scared?" "There are 4 of us here." "5 people," Steve muttered, but it was loud enough for all of us to hear. "I mean, Jenny hasn't come." Steve looked a bit embarrassed, and we all exchanged smiles. We all knew Steve had a crush on Jenny for ages, but he never had the guts to say anything. Joe came up with a new idea. Each person would share a ghost story. I agreed. The spooky atmosphere made the ghost stories way more interesting. First up was Naomi. She told a story about a young guy who delivered pizza. When he got to the address, his friends jumped out and scared him. He was so scared that he had a heart attack and almost died. What kind of ghost story doesn't have a bit of suspense? Joe made fun of Naomi's story, while Steve and I just laughed. It was my turn next, followed by Steve's, and Joe kept complaining that the stories were too boring. But when it was his turn, his face looked confused and scared. Joe changed the subject and started gossiping about Jenny. A friend told me that some rich guy confessed to Jenny this afternoon. It's not surprising that someone confessed to her. Naomi was still annoyed with Joe about what just happened, and replied with a frustrated tone. But this guy's different. I heard he's gay. He just wanted to use Jenny as a cover-up. Joe's story was even more engaging and dramatic than the ghost stories we'd just heard. Steve looked pretty pensive. It was true. He really liked Jenny, so he wasn't thrilled to hear that story. Steve stood up and said he needed to use the bathroom and would grab a bag to collect the trash. I told Naomi to call Jenny again before we wrapped up the party, but it was still just a long ring. After a few minutes of silence, Joe came up with another trick. He asked Naomi and me to hide and scare Steve when he came back, and that's how the plan we all thought fun and perfect was born. We set Joe's phone to record Steve's reaction and hide. Steve's footsteps got louder and louder as he entered the room, and he looked around with a pretty panicked expression. Steve quickly ran over to clear all the leftover food and trash from the table and opened it up. The three of us stood silently watching Steve without saying anything. It turned out the table was actually a box the whole time, and we had no idea. Steve stared at the box for a long time with a worried look before quickly turning around and leaving. As soon as he left, we showed ourselves. The three of us didn't say a word, just looked at each other with confused expressions before walking over to the still open box. Naomi screamed right away, her voice sounding like it was about to snap. Joe and I clung to each other tightly, like we were trying to hold on for dear life. Inside the box was Jenny, her body twisted, and her blue dress almost completely red. Steve came back with a sack in one hand and a sharp knife in the other. We looked at Steve, and he looked back at us with a stiff, unblinking gaze. "I probably need to grab 3 more sacks," Steve growled and tightened his grip on the knife. I grabbed Naomi and pushed her to run quickly, shouting at Joe to get out of the way. After a while, Joe and I managed to subdue Steve, but we both ended up with some serious cuts on our hands. Naomi cried and called the police, and they arrived just in time. Naomi, Joe, and I were stunned to find out that Steve had murdered Jenny. He was the rich guy from Joe's story. Steve had multiple personalities, one of which liked Jenny, and another that was interested in a different guy at the same time. The trauma of having his sexuality exposed and being rejected by Jenny drove him to madness. So which personality did Steve use when he was with us over the past 5 years? We had so many great memories together, and the image of a kind, warm friend was completely shattered. Our close-knit group of 5 friends had to go through such a horrific and terrible experience. Naomi was deeply affected psychologically after seeing Jenny's body. Joe also became much quieter and more cautious. But in the end, we always supported each other, prayed for Jenny, and remembered Steve.